In our last episode, we talked about procurement conferences. And one of the purposes of our podcast is actually to debate and talk about different perspectives. And I feel like we kind of agreed on a lot of the things as it relates to procurement conferences. So for this episode, I think it would be interesting for us to dive in to talk about LinkedIn. I am probably one of the most fanatical people in the industry about LinkedIn. I spend probably 2 to 3 hours a day, 7 days a week
Mhm.
on the platform, both for myself and working with the brands that I'm working with and helping them better leverage and utilize LinkedIn. So, needless to say, I spend a lot of time on the platform. I'm a big believer in LinkedIn. I know you, Dr. Elouise, use LinkedIn a lot as well, but there's some things that have happened with the platform that you don't love and you're maybe not so excited about. So I'd like to have us kind of talk through some of our different perspectives and how both of us use the platform because I think we use it pretty differently in some ways.
Yes, this is we're going to be our third episode, and we are definitely going to disagree on this one. And I am going to be quite cranky. I'm taking the role of cranky person today, cranky elderly person today.
I will be the optimistic millennial. Everything is roses and you'll be the naysayer today. So let's start by talking about what is your weekly routine on LinkedIn? Like, how are you as a digital futurist and a consultant actually using the platform today?
So I use it. I'm both a consultant and an influencer of sorts. And I spend a lot of time reading posts and tracking what people in my network do. I do post once a week, maybe twice a week. Although this week I'm gonna end up posting 4 times a week.
Our podcast is going to give you more content to post about.
Exactly, a lot more content, and so I use it as a distribution channel, and I'm sure we'll do a separate episode. We can talk later. I'm trying to build out my YouTube and TikTok channels, so I look at them. I'm starting to look at all of the channels from different, or actually, I'm just trying to build as much broadcast capability. And LinkedIn is really good for that. But I think on a day-to-day basis, I predominantly use it for keeping tabs on what's happening in the world of procurement and procure tech specifically. What I will add just one tiny bit is I do, although I'm slow to respond, those of you that have reached out, I do respond to all LinkedIn messages, and my door is always open. And so I will frequently spend an hour or two going through messages and replying to people and offering to meet up with, or take meetings from that.
So I want to clarify something because when you say a message on LinkedIn, that can mean a few different things. When you say message, are you mean you have an existing connection with someone and they're sending you a DM?
So I do mean it as a DM, although I will take DMs from anybody. So even if we're not connected, I
Okay,
do get a lot
so
of
in
people.
mail then. So what you're saying
Yes.
is you'll do an in mail, you'll actually respond. And I'm asking because a lot of people I know will not. They will not respond to an in mail because an in mail is what somebody sends you if it's not a connection, but you are responding to both.
Correct. If it's an outright advertisement, I won't respond, but legitimately, I would at least 20% come from in mail, and I do respond.
Okay. Now you mentioned before the podcast, which you'll be posting more and you'll have more content probably to share, but you've been posting about 2 days a week. Is there a strategy around when you're posting, how you're posting, and why you're posting, or are you just more of the spur of the moment? It's 8 o'clock at night. I have an idea. I'm going to type it up and get it out.
No, there is a very much a strategy, and I think I've locked on for me and my network at the optimal time is 6 o'clock Pacific, 6 a.m. Pacific, because a lot of my network is in Europe and the East Coast and as well as the West Coast. And so if I hit it right at 6 a.m., I get squarely in the afternoon, late afternoon in Europe. I get the East Coast and Central as they're coming online. And then there's enough and this is conjecture on my part, but I'm pretty sure with enough activity with those constituencies, by the time the West Coast comes online, the LinkedIn algorithms like thinking that my content should be shown to the West Coast people. So that's my optimal, I think, time. I try to do it on Mondays and Thursdays. Fridays are hit and miss, and I tend not to post on the weekend. I try to get people when I think they would be looking at this throughout the day. What I post is a little different in that recently, of course, I have my new YouTube channel and lots of YouTube content. So I've been posting those, but I try to post more compelling content that I've taken time to, by compelling, I mean my own process of compelling, what I think is compelling to put out there is I've taken time to write something up and to really make it something useful versus just sharing a link or I
Or
don't do the
posting a
sharing a
dog
link.
photo.
Yeah, or a dog photo or any of that. And those are perfectly fine things to do. I just tend to be very focused and some of my content is LinkedIn articles and I'm where I can go much longer and write something that is more meaningful. I had a bunch of those kind of at the end of last year. But that's kinda my strategy.
And then is there a type of post that you're leaning into? And for those that are listening who aren't heavy LinkedIn users, there's several different types of posts. There's polls, there's text only, there's image, there's document, there's video. Are you leaning into one more than the other that you're finding is really resonating with your audience?
Well, I think well, I don't think the numbers show that most of my content does pretty well because it is compelling. I'm saying something, usually there's a bunch of written text and an image, or written text and a link to a video or a link to a longer article. So in general, I get pretty consistent impressions and click throughs, and so or reposts or comments or interactions. So that's all really good, and I'm happy about that, and I'm good with that. I don't do polls. I don't do some of the other things that are well well worn in the LinkedIn canon, if you will.
Okay. Yeah, it's from the posts of yours that I've seen, it seems like text only, image, or video are really kind of the
Yeah.
three that you lean into the most.
And of course, I'm sure we'll do a teaser, but we'll do a whole separate episode on my spider chart, and that is exponentially more than anything. In fact, you could take all of my other posts and combine them, and they don't get nearly the amount of impressions and comments and whatnot that the spider chart gets. So I do have that I post quarterly, more or less, and that does really, really well.
Which you just posted an iteration Monday, and I think episode 4, we actually have it on the docket to dive in and talk about some of the changes and things you've made. So perfect timing to mention that as we will plug episode 4 of the podcast.
Yes.
So I want to talk a little bit about how I use LinkedIn
Which
as someone.
which I'm dying to learn because, like, this is the like, listeners, pay attention, get your notepads out. This is gonna be a master class in LinkedIn.
So I want to start by just giving some data around why I'm such a huge proponent of LinkedIn. So I have been using it for several years. It's been a very important part of my strategy as I was building my career as an individual contributor. then running teams, now having my own business doing consulting, LinkedIn has been really instrumental in all three of those areas. And I track data. I want to know, for all the time and resources I'm spending, is it working? Should I be doing it or not? So I think that's important. And there's a couple that I want to share with the audience. The first is, when I started my career in marketing, procurement, software sales as an individual contributor, so it was just me, I wasn't managing a team, I closed over $25 million in net new business as a result of using LinkedIn.
Wow, that's impressive.
When I transitioned more into a management leadership role and I was building and running sales and marketing teams, we leaned in heavily to LinkedIn. I don't have the exact figure, but it's several $1 million that my teams have generated in net new business as a result of using LinkedIn as well. I have landed 2 jobs from LinkedIn, and I started my business a couple months ago, and my first client reached out to me because of a comment that I made on somebody else's post on LinkedIn. So my very first client for my business came in directly as a result of my usage and activity on LinkedIn. LinkedIn has over 1 billion users now on the platform. That is a
Wow.
huge, huge number. They actually reached that number last year in 2023. So, of all of the platforms out there, and when I'm saying platforms, I'm meaning other social platforms, no one has had the steady, consistent growth as LinkedIn has. If you look at from the day it was incepted through today, they've had the most consistent, steady, stable growth of any other platform. In my go-to-market work, and now working with multiple different procure tech brands, I'm a big believer in talking to subject matter experts and speaking with customers as much as possible. One of the things I always ask and encourage the groups that I work with to ask is, where are you going to consume business information? I think it's a very important question to ask procurement buy side individuals. Another question that I always include is, what social platform do you use the most for business today? And overwhelmingly, when you look at the hundreds of surveys I've done and all the market research that I've gathered, LinkedIn is by far the top response that procurement folks say in regards to where they're going to consume business information. I also think,
That's well, that's really I just have to say that's really fascinating, and I didn't actually know any of those statistics, so I'm really happy to learn that.
I also think that you cannot rely on somebody else to build your career. You have to do it yourself. No matter what company you work for, no matter how big the company is, how great the brand is, no matter what the company's reputation is, or no matter who your boss is, you have to take control and own your own career. And I think LinkedIn is a great platform to be able to build your personal brand and establish yourself as an expert in whatever it is that you want to be known as an expert for. And it allows you to do that by producing high quality content and distributing it to the right individuals. So those are some of the reasons why I have leaned in so heavily and continue to do so. I also want to give, and then I'll talk about how I'm specifically using it. But I also want to give a call out to someone named Richard Vanderbloom, and he is one of my favorite LinkedIn consultants. So he has a business completely centered around LinkedIn. Companies hire him to help them implement LinkedIn strategies and better leverage LinkedIn to close more business and build brand awareness. He speaks globally. And 5 years ago, him and his team realized that LinkedIn gives really crappy data as a company around what's working and not working on the platform. So he decided he was going to get a team together and they were going to study over 1 million LinkedIn posts. And what they did is they published a report that showed all of their findings. Here's everything that they learned, good, bad, or indifferent. And it was so successful, he gives it away for free. It was so successful that he's done it now 5 years straight. Now, this year's came out a little bit later than normal because LinkedIn made some pretty major changes to the platform at the end of last year. So he wanted to make sure that that was captured and reflected in the report. And that report is what I call my LinkedIn posting Bible. I literally block off hours in my calendar the week that comes out, and it's like 100 slides, so it's a lot. And I go through every single slide and I take notes. And his findings will guide a lot of my strategy around what time do I post, how do I produce my content, and then what types of posting that I do. There's just a ton of great stuff in that report. So I wanted to just throw that out there for any of the listeners who are wanting to do more with the platform and kind of need somewhere to start. That's a great report. Feel free to ping me on LinkedIn and I'm happy to share that as well. So that was kind of a ton at once, but that's my why around why I'm a big proponent of it. So now how do I actually use LinkedIn as a marketer, as a go-to-market strategist? It's somebody who's working with multiple procure tech brands. I like to break LinkedIn into 4 buckets. The first is your profile. The second is followers and connections. The third is commenting, and the fourth is content creation and posting. Profile optimization matters a lot. That means you're actually going in and making the best profile you can. And that's I could do a whole episode just on that. I have a checklist of like 20 things, but a couple things I want to just call out that I think are probably the most important, especially for our audience. Your LinkedIn header image, which is the image that goes behind your headshot, is really important. Now, if you're working for a company, they'll probably give you some sort of branded header to use so everyone looks branded and consistent. But if you are on your own and you are building a brand, make sure you have a header that clearly articulates and explains the problem that you solve. Having no image, you're totally wasting really important real estate on LinkedIn. And putting your company name or logo and nothing else does not tell me in the 5 seconds that you have to capture my attention as I'm scrolling through what problem you solve or what your company does. So have a really, really impactful, meaningful header image. The space behind your headshot, so you'll have your circle headshot, and then you have all these characters below it. Most people put their company name and their title. Do not do that. If that is what you've done, immediately go into your profile and delete that. That is already listed in your experience section. You are wasting the most important real estate on your profile by regurgitating that information up there. That should be used to, I like bullet points. You can do dots or emojis or however you break it up. Put the most unique things about you and the value that you provide in that section. Make it long, make it detailed. These should be what's going to make you stand out against everybody else in the space. When you scroll down, there's 2 sections in your profile that a lot of people will put information about themselves and what they've done. That's the about section and then the experience section down below. Include statistics and metrics around how you've impacted business outcomes. I cannot tell you how many people I get on their profile and they'll say things like, I'm the best. I managed a team of 20 people. So what? Tell me why you are valuable in how you've impacted revenue or impacted business outcomes. So put statistics and data in both of those sections. And then if you scroll down more towards the bottom of your profile, there's a section called recommendations. Turn that off if you don't have any recommendations. It looks really bad to have no recommendations. I personally think everyone should try to get one recommendation a month. Put it on your calendar as a reoccurring event. Go out to colleagues, customers, previous bosses, team members, and try to really build out high quality recommendations. So I'll pause there before I move into bucket two. Dr. Elouise, anything else from your perspective around profiles that we want to call out for procurement professionals?
No, but I've just been very subtly in the background making edits to my profile while you've been talking. It's like, oh, I made that mistake and I made that mistake. I'm currently turning off the recommendations. What I will say though is for the little bit under your name, I've started to try to do more memorable words. So I do have futurist, keynote speaker, author, and I recently added technology cynic, and I put that there to see if to track whether or not people actually are reading it, and just because it's kind of fun, and I'm waiting. So far nobody's commented on it, but I do change. I do put periodically funny little quips in there to just to see if people read them.
I recommend your very last bullet often being something even personal about yourself. I have done things like Yellowstone fanatic. I'm obsessed with the show. I just went to Montana last week. Now I'm even more obsessed with the show. I love Bradley Cooper. So I'll put little things. And to your point, Dr. Eloise, I actually do have a fair amount of people that will include that. Like, love Yellowstone too. Can't believe they just ended it in the middle of season 5, or they'll send like a funny Bradley Cooper gift. So love that idea of putting little things in there to see if that gets referenced. And personal is okay. We're human. We buy from people. We have human relationships. So including something personal is not a bad thing. All right, bucket number 2, followers and connections. So I want to be very clear about this. Those are two different things. Someone can follow you and not be a connection. Every connection automatically is a follower. Okay, I want to say that one more time. Followers and connections are two separate things. Every connection is a follower, but every follower is not a connection. You can have an unlimited number of followers. There are people I've seen that have over 1 million followers on LinkedIn. LinkedIn limits your connections to 30,000 people. I'm over 26,000 connections. I'll probably get to 30,000 by the end of this year. And then I'm going to have to go through and start deleting connections to make room for connections, new connections that I want to get. So connections are limited, followers are not. Why do I like connections? Why do I like followers? And then Dr. Eloise, I would like your perspective on this. Connections allow you to send a DM. Followers, you have to send an email. In my experience, in-mails look very, very spammy and often get ignored. So if there's somebody that I really want to communicate or message with, I want them to be a connection so I can send them a DM. It looks more human, it looks more real. It's more likely that my message is going to get read.
Yeah. So for me, I don't discern as much, and I don't have nearly the followership that you have. So I tend not to. I don't worry about it. Although what I do focus on is trying to double the number of followers I have every year, and I make a concerted effort to do that.
Okay. So for you, as you get closer to your 30,000, your strategy may change, right?
Yep.
You may kind of assess and look at how you're doing that. But if you're, under 20,000 connections, probably not something to be overly worried about. You also, I will call out, sometimes you get those people who send you a connect request, they look legit. I always make sure I have a lot of mutual connections in common, right? I'll go do my due diligence. And sometimes it's really obnoxious, spammy. You can block someone. So if somebody
Yeah.
becomes a connection and you're like, ew, I want them out of my network, you can immediately block them and they will be removed and no longer see your profile or your content.
Yeah, I should note that for all connections, I do review them. I don't just randomly click accept. And and you have to have supply chain in your title or procurement and something relevant. And then if it has sales, because oftentimes procure tech companies, it'll be the CRO or head of marketing. I will click on those if we have a lot of mutual connections, but I have a lot of various checkpoints that I do to not just fill up with a bunch of connections. Um,
Yeah.
so they have to have a profile picture. That's also a give a tell.
Yeah, don't have a profile if you don't have a picture. Just 101, like, common sense. Like, don't have a profile if you're gonna hide who you are. Now, some people I've known have it where they only show the profile picture once you're a connection, but I would argue you're gonna really struggle to get new people to connect with you without the profile, and don't have a freaky profile picture. I mean,
Yeah,
I've had people send me and I'm like, "That is so creepy." Absolutely not. I'm blocking or not accepting just because of your profile picture.
yeah, yeah,
All right, bucket number 3 is commenting. This is probably the most underutilized part of LinkedIn, and for all of you listening, if you're gonna take a takeaway today, I would argue this is probably one of the most important things you can do to immediately build your brand and increase your following on LinkedIn. I like to say that magic happens in the comments. You do not have to post your own content to be impactful and build a brand on LinkedIn. Writing thoughtful, intentional comments can really, really boost your brand and boost your following. So, something that I have instituted for myself, and I'm going to encourage all of you to do something similar, it's the 10 comments a day rule. So I have a list of people that I follow. These are people that are thought leaders, people that I respect. Maybe these are procure tech brands that I'd like to do business with. I have my rationale and I have my spreadsheet of the people that I'm following on LinkedIn. I will block off time every single day to read content, so some of their posts, and then I will take time to write a thoughtful, intentional comment. That does not mean great post. Love what you said. This means you're writing a paragraph. You're maybe writing 2 paragraphs and you're talking about the topic, and you maybe are disagreeing, but you're adding a unique perspective and you're adding value. Doing that 5 days a week minimum. I do it on the weekends as well. I respect people who shut off and have downtime on the weekends, but at least 5 days a week, have the people that you follow do your 10 comments a day. Once you do your comment, also read through, look at the other comments and look at the people who have also commented. You might find some really interesting people in the comments that you want to start a dialogue with and exchange with. And then that's a great trigger to find new people to reach out to. In your connect request, you would say, you and I both commented on Dr. Elouise's LinkedIn post yesterday. Like what you said, don't necessarily agree, but here's my perspective. Something like that in the comments, and then you're going to get new connections. So, really, really important to make the time to comment on posts. And I would argue if you are not writing your own content today, this is a great way to start getting active on LinkedIn before we get to step 4, which is creating and posting your own content. Dr. Elouise, so you are crazy busy. You probably have the busiest schedule of anybody I know. How do you manage comments on your posts?
not terribly well. I will read them. I will make sure I acknowledge them by with a reaction, and to the degree that I can. Oftentimes, when I'm on a plane, I will sit there and go through the comments and reply, especially like on the spider chart. It usually takes me a few days to get to them, and there's often a lot of them. Like it's not uncommon with the spider chart to get like 100 comments, so it takes some time to go through. Uh, but in general, I try to acknowledge them as best I can, and if somebody says they love it, then there's not much, or great job. There's not much to add to that. So,
Yeah.
but what I do is like you, with creators like yourself and Amanda and Shachi and um, some of the others that we are collectively when in connection with. I will make a point to comment on their posts, because by commenting and reacting, or if any of my clients do it, by commenting and reacting, it flags it for the algorithm that this is good content, and so I like to make a point to do that.
Yep. Okay. Fourth bucket, content creation and posting. This is the scary in the room. Many people that I talk to or clients that I work with, they are very scared about posting something publicly, that they don't know what to write about. They're not interesting enough. They don't have anything to say. So that's a big hurdle. And that's why I have this listed as number 4, because 1, 2, and 3 are a good way to ease into leveraging and using LinkedIn more. So for me personally, I do 1 post a day, 7 days a week. My weekend posts perform the best. Why do I think that is? I think people are on LinkedIn more on the weekends because they're not in the grind of their job and they're scrolling. They've got a couple extra hours here, they've got some time here, and less people are posting content on the weekends. So the people that are posting, I think their content gets shown more. So for me, posting on Saturday and Sunday is really important. And those are typically my highest performing posts. What in the world should you be writing about? Number 1 is be human and be yourself. If I read one more post that sounds like an AI robot wrote it, I don't know what I'm going to do. But be who you are. I call it being your digital twin. You are who you are in the real world. Be that person online as well. Don't try to be somebody you're not. And you don't need to be overly corporate. Don't use all these big fancy words that you wouldn't normally use in real life. Be human and be yourself. Storytelling and pain point driven content are my 2 favorite types of content to produce. So, if you're on the buy side and you have a big negotiation, you have a stakeholder that you're having a challenge with, or you have a big win with a stakeholder, or you got promoted, or you're a new boss and you're managing a team, all of these things are stories. Things that you've accomplished, things that you've learned, things that you wish you hadn't done that you don't ever want to do again. Turn those into a story and post that online. You don't need to use names. You don't need to call out companies. You can say it in a very discreet way. I'll even sometimes do stories with dialogue where it is literally says me as Sarah in a quotation, and then it has the dialogue with the other person. I'll often change the other person's name. So I'm not, sharing something that they're not comfortable with. Sometimes they are, and I'll ask, I'll get permission. Can I do this post? Are you comfortable? And they'll say yes or no. Pain points. You, as working in the industry, whether you're on the buy or sell side, where there are things that you're dealing with and problems that you're solving. Other people have those problems too. Believe me, you are not alone. So call out and talk about what those are and the mistakes you made and or how you solved them. Other people can learn and other people can also add insights and ideas. The other thing I'll say about this, and we mentioned this, I think, in another episode, is I think video is going to be the future. Video is harder to fake using AI than just a text only post. So I think trying to incorporate video into your strategy is important and will become more important as AI kind of makes text only posts more general and more blah.
Totally agree. And I also think people engage more with the video and it or in that it grabs them and they remember it versus just reading a bunch of text. And I'm a writer and that kills me to say that, but I can write a beautiful thing and it just people don't absorb it.
So I'm a huge believer in LinkedIn for building a personal brand in the procurement industry. I'm also a huge believer in leveraging it in a go to market and sales strategy for those that are actually selling into buy side. And for procure tech brands, it's a great way to gather intel and get research. Now, there are some not so great things about the platform as well. So, Dr. Elouise, why don't you kind of unload about some of your, I don't know what to call them. Maybe it's
Well,
pet peeves.
yeah, so the one thing I do a lot of is consume, and I scroll through my feed quite a bit, many times a day. And I'm really and look, for all the reasons you stated, I love LinkedIn and I use it a lot, and it's a powerful tool for me. That said, the content has become very boring that's out there. It's almost I wrote down this word blasé and repetitive. Whenever there's a conference, and you know how I feel about conferences, you see the same pictures, people at dinner taking a picture and saying how great conference X was. And that's
Or the
good.
booth photos. We're the best. We're
Yeah,
the
we're the best. Yeah, exactly. And look, and I'm guilty of this too. I go to these conferences, I'm excited, I take pictures, post them online. But as a consumer of the content, it's like, okay, great. Like 400 people went to, or maybe 40 people went to this conference, and I've seen 40 different pictures of this. So what? Like that mean as a consumer of the content is like, okay, fine. All right. No big deal. Then so that's the category one of this, the blase and boring. The second category of content is we are the best, and we it's like patting yourselves on the back,
It's the
and
award. We won this award. We won this award.
oh, it's dreadful. And look, congratulations, I'm happy that you won this, but you screaming it from the top of your lungs that says we are king of the mountain or queen of the mountain. It's like, good for you, but that did not, like, I just scroll right past that. I just don't, it does not resonate for me, does not tell me anything
Well, it's
other
not
than
adding any value to the consumer.
right, exactly. And I very much consider myself a consumer of all this content. And I will, it's not uncommon for me to scroll through 100 posts and not find anything of interest or worth commenting or giving a reaction to, aside from, like I said, the people that I in connection with. So that's my number 2 issue, and so, like, taken together, those 2 things, like, 100 out of 100 posts that LinkedIn shows me gave me nothing, no, like, did not enhance I in any way, which, by the way, sidebar, is not true for me with TikTok and YouTube. I I can't tell you how many times I click like and subscribe and do all the things on those platforms in ways that just does not resonate
And
with me
5
on the
hours later, you look at the clock.
totally 5 hours later. I mean, yeah, anyway, we'll talk about those platforms another day, but yeah, I mean, they're so compelling and they hook me, whereas LinkedIn just feels like okay, I gotta grind it out just so I make sure I'm aware of what's going on. But all of that I can, like, accept. But what I really am having an issue with, and I know I'm not the only one on this, is we are starting to see content that's not business related. And I that's not the, as you said, LinkedIn is the number one business platform. And I get it. By the way, I don't want to diminish. The world is absolutely on fire right now, and people are amped up. I'm amped up, and I get it. But there are other places and other platforms for that content. And when it gets political, when it gets to be too news, current events, I just, whether it's right or wrong, I'm not making a judgment. I'm just saying that, like, when I see that, I go flipping past even faster than I do with the boring content, because I get plenty of that content on other platforms. I really, really, really want to just have business content here, because at the end of the day, I want to learn. I want to learn from everybody that's out in the LinkedIn world and build my network. And I feel like I have a job to do, and that helps me do my job. And when I have to, whether it's subtle or overt, or sometimes it's definitely not subtle, I can't, I can't with that, because I really want LinkedIn to be business related.
I will throw something in there. I do think there is room to incorporate personal things with a business twist.
Sure, but that's I what I will say is that takes nuance. And I think if it's done improperly, it can be off-putting. And look, I'm sure when people do it, they do it deliberately and they don't care. But I actually think you can, I'm all for doing that, especially when you think about issues like forced labor or modern slavery, and there are sort of social elements that you can embed into a business post. But to take something that's in the headlines, rip it out, and then start to advocate that, whatever, like, loosely tie it to business, or just say that this caustic issue in the world is going to hurt business, that's a lazy way of incorporating that.
Yeah, so more I think along the lines what I was thinking is example, the last team that I managed in house, I instituted something called no meeting Fridays. I thought that was really important for my team in order to be able to get work done. And I did some posts around productivity and marketing teams. And I incorporated some personal stories and personal images that I think were important to have a personal touch. But I do think I related it back to business and productivity for those that are in go to market in our industry. So I while I agree, I am the least um I'm the least open to political posts on LinkedIn. I just think there's no place for that. I do think you can creatively incorporate some human personal things and tie it back to business.
Yeah, see, I buy the human. By the way, I used to read your things all the time, and you have me at no meeting Friday. Like, that's a very legitimate business thing.
Yeah.
And actually, what when and reading all of those posts, because I did read them each week, it humanized your team or the people you were
Yes.
interviewing, and it made me want to tune into them and really understand the team that you had. So I actually think that was a very powerful tool. So putting something personal like that, it makes it memorable and it relates to us on a human level. But talking about blaming a particular presidential administration because there's a delay in whatever supply chain or a disruption here or legislation there. I mean, take that to Facebook, boomer. I'm just kidding. But it's like we can, or if you're a Gen Z, take it to TikTok. But I get all of that content in other channels. I want to talk about what's working, what's not working, or what I can learn in the business world.
So I'll throw in two more pet peeves. One is very relevant because I just dealt with this Monday and Tuesday of this week. People who use AI comment bot software,
Mm,
stop doing it immediately. I will do a post and then you'll see people either it's a company page or it's a person and they will automatically, you go look at your profile, and there's 6 comments within 2 minutes, and you can tell they were not written by a human. And how do you know? It's summarizing your post, which you already know what you wrote. You don't need a summary. It is has no value, there's no opinion, there's no, like, feedback, and what I'll do to check is I will respond with a question, and there's never a response back. So I actually there are 3 profiles that have been doing it for over a month on my posts, and I just can't stand it because I'm very thoughtful and intentional about reading all my comments and responding. So I actually reached out to them and said, "It appears that you're running this software. Here's why I think so. If you are, I'd like to ask you to turn it off. I encourage you to engage with my content, but I'd like to have you write it and add your own perspective or value." So just I have no place for that. If you're doing it, turn it off, don't use it. It's not going to build your brand. It's going to annoy people, and they're actually going to block your content on LinkedIn. Other pet peeve is companies or people using automation software that are blanket messaging sequences to people that have done no research on the person that they're sending it to. So, a couple examples is oftentimes this comes in an InMail because you're not a connection, right? So, I also, in my mind, more discredit InMails just because I get more of these automation messages. I'm not opposed to automation software. I use it, and companies that I work with use it. So, I'm not against that. What I'm
I
against
use
is,
it too.
yeah,
Yeah, I use it too.
I'm against sending so here's 2 examples that I received recently. These were these in mail. And then when you don't respond, they keep sending the follow-ups, right? One person was asking me if I wanted to buy a horse. Okay. I am not an animal person. I have no animals. I don't ride horses and I don't want to ride horses. No, I don't want to buy a horse. So stop sending me that message. Nowhere in my profile does it scream that I'm a horse person. Other example, somebody messaged me about something in healthcare. I am not in healthcare. There's nothing in my profile or background that relates to healthcare. So if you are somebody who's doing that, stop doing it. And when you run your searches in Sales Navigator, which is what I use a lot in LinkedIn, it's not cheap, but I do think it's a really good search tool. Narrow down your searches and send messaging to people that's relevant, that shows that you can solve a problem for them.
Yes. I have one more related. And I just got this is somebody commenting and then putting in the comment an ad, essentially an ad. It was written by a human but an ad for this person's business. I'm like, okay, I haven't even decided what to do with it. It was just like, oh my god.
Sales pitch comments, I delete.
Oh, you do delete them.
I
Okay.
absolutely delete them. I don't want them in my feed or in my content. If I think it's really obnoxious and uncalled for, I will message the person privately and say, "I would appreciate no more sales pitches on my content. FYI, I've removed this from my post."
Okay. All right. Well, we know what I'll be doing after this.
All right, so that was a lot of content about LinkedIn. One of the things that for our listeners that we're encouraging is people to submit questions or topics that they would like us to discuss on our show. So as we kind of round out our LinkedIn conversation, Dr. Elouise, we actually had someone already submit a pretty specific question. This was actually from a female listener. She sent it to me as a LinkedIn DM. And so I wanted to close out sharing her question and then getting your perspective and feedback and maybe some guidance for her.
Okay. Yeah.
It says, can you address the issue of companies requiring employees to prepare presentations after attending conferences meant for their personal development to be shared or given to management or the team? It would be helpful to shed light on why this practice might be seen as unfair or misguided.
The idea here is, as I interpret it, and look, it's different for everybody, but where it's been in my experience is that somebody goes to a conference, and if the company pays for it, oh, well, let's use this as a training opportunity to disseminate all this great information. So and so went to X conference. Let's take all the notes and distribute it back to the team so everybody can learn. And I think that might have been okay 20 years ago. But now all of the conferences, or most of them, have they're recorded, and they post the recordings, and they do much of what we've been talking about, social interaction around them. So the people at your company should want to follow all of and watch these presentations live. That we shouldn't be putting a burden on the people that attended. It's sort of like a school, like a school assignment, like write this essay, or you're going to go on a week-long vacation with your parents during the middle of the semester. All right, well, you can get out, you can be excused from school, but you have to write an essay about what you did. And it's like, who are we writing that essay for? And because that doesn't mean learning didn't happen. It just means it didn't happen vis-a-vis the classroom. And I think that ideology kind of permeates this. Oh, I don't trust you to go to this conference. I'm going to pay for you to go to this conference, and you're probably just going to go hang out at the bar all day. And even if you did that, by the way, that would be okay because you would be networking, I suspect, the whole time. So in this era, that why are we putting the burden on the person attending the conference? Again, assuming I understood the question properly. And even more to the point, if you really want to get a summary, now, why wouldn't you just take a little Gen AI or Open AI bot and have it interrogate all of the 200 videos from the conference, from all the sessions, summarize it for, not for you, but for the team, and distribute it? And and really what I'm getting at is use conferences for networking, use conferences for making connections. And if you only go to, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 sessions, that's good. If as long as you spend the rest of the time going to vendor booths or talking to people or making connections, to me, that's a success. And I think this gets a little bit back to the employee trust issue that management hasn't quite wrapped its head around, in terms of enabling and empowering individual employees at whatever rank they are. So that's my interpretation and rant on that question.
So my perspective, one, hire people you trust. If you don't trust your
Yeah,
people, don't hire them.
exactly.
Number two, I have always made it a requirement, any company that I've worked at, is I have some personal development budget. Now, I work primarily with startups, so budgets are not big, but I've always, as a leader, said, I need to have some sort of personal development budget for my team. And I will meet with my team and I will allot the budget amongst the team, and I that is their budget to own and manage. They make their decision around how they want to spend it. If they want to go to a conference, if they want to attend a networking event, that is on them, and that is for their personal development. There is no presentation, there's no reporting back unless they choose to do so. So it's a very clear distinction. Have then a separate budget. And again, this is different if you're on the marketing and sales and go to market side, which is a company spend. These are company focused events where we're going as part of our go to market strategy to build brand, to generate revenue. Very different than something that comes out of the personal development budget. So, what I would recommend for this listener is, can you work with management to build out some sort of personal development budget for the team next year? And that is yours to own and manage, as use as you would like, without having any sort of micromanagement or reporting back.
Love that.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Join us next Wednesday as we do a deep dive into Dr. Elouise's newest iteration of her spider map.